We're all learning here. When things get really frustrating, I quit. Right? I'm taking vacation. Actually, I take the Bahamas. It's really nice this time.
At least this thing works.
It's Kelsey.
Good about yourself.
Doing okay. Rick?
All right.
How you doing?
Because that's such a short
Boy, it feels a little sparse over there.
No.
You want to move around the corner, Rick? Join the line here?
I can do that.
If you want.
Really good day.
I'll put this right in the middle.
No matter what.
Yeah, that's,
Is that better?
sure. We'll have to shout.
Good. Morning, dude.
You guys. Second page. When you say full game, no, pull it off. This is full. You can pull it off. Sure. But this one. Just throw it that way. Number 3, authorized. It's this one, number 6. Until we have a full board.
Yep. Yeah, I was.
Okay, so you're.
What do you want? Maybe sit that I just see it.
And quite frankly, we can even defer this route 11 from case for another shot. So you're gonna make that motion down there for the full list.
Revising ours.
When we get to a
Oh, that's It's on us. It's again.
It's a white and 5 and 6.
Okay, you've got your cards ready, your timer ready, and
It doesn't make sense to try and silence the timer because so I have my
yeah, you have your watch, you have your cards, here we go. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, March 27th. This is a Highland Transit board meeting, and if you would join me, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and get this meeting going. Pledge allegiance.
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We operate our meetings on an agenda. I believe we have an agenda at the rear of the room here. If you don't have one, we'll get one for you. We will introduce our guests if we have any guests. And it looks like we just have our board. We're missing two of the board members, Jackie Henderson and Jill Johnson. Let the record show that we do have a quorum with Mr. Sundberg, Mr. Henold, and myself, Rick Elmer. The next point of order here is we will approve the business meeting minutes. Are there any comments on that? Any corrections?
None that I saw.
There's one minor correction that I read in here, in that it says Jeff Craig. I think that's Chuck Craig.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what Chuck's middle name is, but I just know what I've known him for years as Chuck. So that could just be an administrative correction, so we at least get the right people involved here. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move approval of the minutes March
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
February 20th.
All right, Mr. Sundberg has made the motion, Mr. Hanover made the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Obviously, we don't have any, thank you very much. That has been approved. And approval of the minutes for the February 20th,
March 9th.
March 9th, excuse me, the board workshop. Do we have any comments, objections, corrections? If not, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes for March 9th.
Mr. Sun,
I'll second.
we have a second, and any conversation, any discussion about that? Obviously not right now. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It passes. Okay, the next item is our voucher list. Any corrections to the voucher list?
I would just comment that I think we continue to show monthly savings on fuel, which is reflecting the national situation where fuel costs are down.
Do you have any comments also?
Well, no. Actually, it's the same. So I still can't get my arms wrapped around all these different communications companies, and I realized that because of all the different barriers, and it just seems to me that it would be so much easier if we could consolidate some of that. But, no, I have no objections to it.
So I move we accept the monthly voucher list.
All right.
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve the March 2015 master voucher list. And a second, Mr. Hanover. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those obviously no opposed. So that passes. Now on our agenda, I want to move last to the approval of the March 27th agenda items, because I think there are some items for discussion on that. Particularly, I believe that Mr. Hanover would like to pull items 5 and 6 and defer it to the next workshop, partly because we do not have all of the board here, and some of these items really should involve the entire board when we're dealing with or perhaps resuming some routes or modifying routes. So is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to pull item number 5 and 6 from the agenda, so we can discuss it in work session.
To the-
Next one.
Does that motion include deferring it to the next work session?
Yes.
Okay. Motion has been made to pull items number 5 and 6, defer it for discussion and review at the next board workshop.
The only question I would have is on item 6. If we wanted to take action at the next workshop, we need to declare it a special meeting, is that correct?
That is correct.
And we may need to take action because I think if there's going to be a schedule, publicizing the schedule, we would need to do that in April. And so we may want to announce it as a special meeting.
Okay, so let's take these actions separately. We
Yeah.
have a motion right now to pull 5 and 6 and defer it to the next workshop. And I would entertain a second.
Well, I'm just concerned about the timing.
You can make a friendly amendment to that
Yeah.
if we have to take action on, we have a motion on the table right
Right.
now. We need a second to go forward with that.
Okay, well, I'll second that motion and offer the friendly amendment that we may need to designate a special meeting
All right.
for the same time as the workshop.
Okay, so we're going to, we have a motion for deferring 5 and 6 at the next workshop,
Yes.
advertised as a special meeting so that we can take action, possibly take action. Is there a second to that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the friendly amendment to defer the 5 and 6 on the agenda to the next workshop advertised as a special meeting. Okay? Any further discussion? No further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Obviously none, and I vote for it also. So this will be advertised as a special meeting so that we can take possible action at that time. Excellent. Thank you very much.
And actually, Canley, for the next workshop, we're going to make a special meeting for the public. This is a date, that's the second Monday.
That is April 13th, yes. All right, so we have an approved agenda. We are down to our public notes for public comments. We'll move forward to public comments. Please read at the bottom of your agenda packet that public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. We may or may not, the board may or may not make comments or answer public comments. They can ask staff to comment, to reply to the public, but it's not necessarily required. And at that moment, if you would state your name and where you're from, you don't have to give your address, and you have 3 minutes to present to the board whatever your comments or questions would be. We have Kevin back here.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Joe Kunstler. I'm from Cedar Woolley, your Skagitonia neighbor. And I understand the Tri-County Connectors are on the agenda and some final decisions are to be made on that or in the very near future. I want to speak acutely and thoughtfully, considering the time limit, and considering that I care greatly for my neighbors on Whidbey Island, serving this country and answering the phone calls of Alliers, Iraqis, Americans, Afghanis. Obviously, speaking of my friends in America's VAQ wing and the VP wing as well. And It's been a great privilege and honor for me the past few years during the recent crises around the whole of Coopville. And as someone with disabilities who otherwise would be unable to serve or help our Navy friends, to have the Tri-County Connector, to be able to get on the bus and lend public support to the Navy's mission and attend outline field Coopville practices and photograph EA-18Gs bouncing. That's why I'm wearing this shirt. And I really hope that you will, at a bare minimum, use the money that you would normally use for a grant match to provide a skeleton county connector service, please. And please put a fare box on the buses so you can recover 20 to 25% of your costs. And please put advertising on your buses so we can recover a little bit more. Because I think it's only, as somebody who has a job in Mukilteo, I have to pay $2 to get from Burlington to Everett, and I think that's perfectly fair. And on that note, with the yellow card, I will pull up a chair. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kunstler.
Yeah.
I have some questions. My name is Shelley Brunke. I live in Freeland. Most of my questions arise from the cash flow statements that we see online now, and I want to thank you very much for putting them online. One of my questions, and I'll ask all my questions first, and then I'll be quiet.
Okay.
First question, the January cash flow statement shows a $525,000, reserve funds, and I notice it's not on the February statement. I want to ask about those funds. Specifically, I want to know if those funds have been taken off the reserve funds list for February, because technically we really have a place for those funds. We want to pay back our debts, and we want to pay back our insurance deferment that we did not pay. So obviously, if we're going to be paying this insurance deferment in November, and if our income continues the same as it does, we are going to need those funds to do that. Is that correct? That's the first question. The second question is, I do have some questions about how we're repaying the money that we owe in terms of bank money. Specifically, we have bank loans out. One, I understand from Mr. Arenda, we are going to be paying one off this spring, but we have another one now that we will not be paying off until 2019. That surprised me, because it was my understanding we can have all of our debts paid off by the end of this year. So that surprises me. I want to call attention to that. The third thing I'm concerned about by looking at all these financial statements is that I want to understand better how the 411 is going. I know that you deferred speaking about it today, but I think that we all need to be watching this. And I know we're getting state money for this. I want to be sure that this money hasn't been co-mingled with operating expenses, and I want to take a close look at that. Okay, so just know that we are going to be watching on these things, and that we will need to see the 411 moving ahead. We've taken money for it. We want to see it happening, and we'd like to see it go forth on table, on the schedule that we have. And then and you could probably just answer this simply for me.
Please address your questions to the chair,
okay.
to the board, and not to the staff, because they will not be responding.
Okay. The last question I have is I'm concerned about maintenance, because I know we're going through a period of time that we have extreme cost cutbacks. And I look at all these things, I see that, expenses are going down, and that's a good thing. But I haven't seen vouchers, and I haven't seen it broken down. I know you guys have that information probably. When you sign the vouchers and when you sign your thing, I'd like to know how much money is going into routine maintenance. I do worry about things like tires. I worry about things like oil, things like this, things that are normally processed in the day-to-day running of an transit system. Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you very much. And I did receive copies of your emails.
Thank you.
And I did discuss those questions with Mr. Graspa, and he did respond to some of those questions. I will give him an opportunity during his period of to speak to generally address some of your questions. He will not go into great detail about it, and there are some questions, even about your questions, that perhaps can be reduced to writing so that the staff and he and the board can respond to you more accurately. Thank you for your comments. Any others, gentlemen? The big Seahawks heard that the S for
That's for the highest side, sorry. But it could be Seahawks. Good morning, my name is Clyde Johnson, and I want to speak to the issue of emergency communications from the bus from a personal perspective. About 3 years ago, coming up from the south of Clinton, and this was during the early afternoon, so we went the long route. I collapsed on the bus. I've been totally healthy all my life, and yet I mentioned to my wife very quickly that something was happening, and the next thing I remember was staring in the face of someone I never saw in my life, and she happened to be a nurse that was knew about nurse procedures on the bus. I had collapsed, my blood pressure went way down. From I understand from my wife, she yelled to the driver that we had an emergency here. He pulled over, tried to communicate through the bus communication system, which was not operating. Managed to use his cell phone, who happened to be in an area where he was able to reach a tower. So the long story short is that if it wasn't for the fact that maybe he was able to reach a tower, the outcome might have been very different. I was in Whidbey Island Hospital for the rest of that day and into the night. And the following day, a couple of days later, I went to Seattle to my primary care physician where I went through a series of tests. My question to you, have you been able to correct the communication issue from a bus in terms of emergencies all over the island? Because now I'm in my mid-70s, and there's a lot of people like me who ride the bus, and they may be in worse shape. And if anything were to happen to them, and that communication system is not operating at 100% efficiency, you have an issue here. And that's what I wanted to present to the board, and hope we can come up with some. Let me know where you are on that, and if it's not there yet, how you're going to proceed to make it work.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Johnson. Any other? We got the gentleman in the back, and I'll get to you, Jeff, in just a minute.
Hi, I'm Dan Brown. I've been in here a couple times, and I was going to ask the board, I didn't want to go into a big thing about the radios today, but that's what I'm here about. And I'd like to ask the board if they can put the radio situation on an agenda so we can find out what is going to happen and where it's going. And I know that you're going to come up with this story about grants. Well, the grants have to be matched, and if you don't have the funds to match them, we just need to know what the heck is going to go on. And that's all I have to say for right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
And any other comments? Mr. Lauderdale.
Jeff Lauderdale, Coopville. I just want to comment on the cash flow summary reports. I appreciate seeing them. My concern is the change between January and February regarding the operating reserves. There was much discussion during the budget process last year, and many assurances were given to the public that we have an operating reserve fund, and it's populated with real money. In the month of February, that population of money disappeared into the regular operating funds. I've seen someone's answer, I'm not sure whether it was Mr. Graska or someone else, saying they no longer felt that it was necessary to highlight that reserve fund, and I'd just like to beg to differ a little bit. It's required, according to your budget documents, by a resolution of this board. I believe it's 1296, and that resolution basically puts that money in a condition that it requires a vote of this board to actually expend it, which makes perfect sense to me. I think we all know, or at least those of us that were involved last year, that one of the major sources of your financial issues in this organization was the expenditure of your reserve funds without anybody noticing. And I think the act of actually expending the reserve fund should be noticed. It should be, this board should take direct action when it needs to be expended so that nobody's surprised. So my suggestion is populate that new box in the bottom of your report with actual numbers. Your budget calls for a beginning of $525,000 in the 2015 budget was set aside in a reserve fund. It needs to be put in there and divided up into the areas that you expect it to be spent for. I do know that you have a bus, you've added a bus fund. I know you're going to spend money on buses. That money ought to be shown that way. And then we can all know what's going on and be able to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lauderdale. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. Bruce Freeman, been attending these meetings for a number of years. I've reviewed the budgets for a number of years. One of the concerns I've had, and what's been brought up today, they talk about communications, they talk about buses. What I haven't seen in the budgets are specifically reserves set aside. I mean, when you buy a bus, I know in the past they bought buses on grants. But money should be taken out of the budget each year or each month and set aside specifically for the purchase of buses should grants not be available. The same thing goes with your communication equipment. All of these different items that you have out there, you're using one reserve fund and you're pulling from that instead of dedicating that. And I think these special expenses like your van pools, your buses, your heavy equipment, things that go wrong, office equipment, money needs to be put aside into budgets, not just strictly operating. They need to be very specific, and the money is pulled out for that. That way, the board knows, Island Transit knows, the community knows, we have the funds to buy the buses should the grants not come in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freeman. Any further? And if somebody has already made comments that you wanted to comment on, I would appreciate it if you, for time, you just say, I agree with the comments that were made, and then we will recognize your comments as supporting that. And I think, Gail, you're next.
Good morning, Gail Zocco-Kirk. I agree with all of them. Basically, though, one of my questions is I requested the presence of your info technology technicians, managers, administrators, whatever you might call them, to attend the meeting to be able to answer some of the public's questions on the radios and some of the other items. I see that they're not here. I have some issues with the radios myself, as well as listening to the audio from last workshop, where I believe the operations manager said that there has never, well, there's the same radios as what was there from 10 years ago when he started, which that's true because they brought over the old antennas from the old building. So that is one thing. They purchased repeaters for the state of the repair grant, which they directed towards Camino instead of here. There's a lot of issues that are involved with this, legal issues. But when I hear the operations manager state that there has never, ever been a safety issue regardless of these radios, and you find out about one that was extremely serious, I really hope that the board steps up and takes this seriously. Because it is an issue, it has been for years, and it's ridiculous that it's not being taken care of, that the public is being brushed off on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
I just wanted to tell you, I
Could
agree
you
with them
stand
on the-
and state your name, please?
I'm Chris Daly, and I just wanted to agree with what these gentlemen said.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you very much. Any further public comments? No further public comments. I have a couple of comments about the questions. Many of these items, such as the reserve fund, I personally support that, in that we should have a reserve fund that's set aside that can only be touched by the majority vote of the board. We have that set up in Oak Harbor. I don't think we have to pattern everything after Oak Harbor, but the Oak Harbor City Council set aside, or required a set aside of 25%, of $3 million, or 25% of the general fund, whichever was greater, so that that percentage stayed with what our income stream is for the purpose of handling emergencies. That was not for the purpose of equipment replacement. That is a totally separate fund. And so this is something that Ken and I have talked about quite a bit. I've talked with Paul about this. We will have a system of having set-asides for the replacement of vehicles and major equipment, and the funding sources that will be tagged to those items. And hopefully the board will go along with me in that the set-aside funds will only be touched with the majority vote of the board. Okay? That way we don't have any opportunity, and I'm not saying that would happen, but we don't have any opportunity with people moving funds around, playing the shell game from one department to the other and from one grant restricted fund to another. That is my personal financial policy with public funds, and I suspect that the board probably shares in concept the same thing. So you will see these issues addressed coming up in both our workshops, in our council meetings. Be patient with us. Please be patient with us, because this is not going to happen in 1 month or 2 months. We are attacking an issue that has accumulated over several years, and the culture is changing. I know that we have the support of the staff and Mr. Grasta, that they are going to help direct the culture of this transit district to function in more of a business format, as well as meeting the needs of our citizens for both transportation, emergency services, etc.